On Taiho's command, Specialist Dongho activated the master code. The code that Ha Supreme Leader Krath stared at his dead weapons console. Around his flagship, 15,000 Vorth ships floated helplessly in space. No power, no weapons, no shields. They were sitting targets. His remaining 35,000 ships were still functional, but they surrounded their crippled brothers like guards protecting wounded soldiers. To fight now would mean firing through their own fleet. On every screen, Commander Taiho waited patiently for a response. His face showed no emotion. No anger, no triumph, just calm certainty. "This is your final warning," Taiho said. "You have 10 minutes to decide. Surrender now, or we will demonstrate what happens when you fight an enemy who has been preparing for 20 years. Admiral Roth touched Krath's arm. "Supreme Leader, we must surrender. We have no choice." "No choice?" Krath's voice was hollow. "We still have 35,000 functional ships. The humans only have 100. With respect, Supreme Leader, do you really believe they only have 100 ships? After everything we have seen? After all their planning? Those 100 ships are bait, just like the empty colonies were bait, just like this entire war has been bait." Krath looked around his bridge. His officers stared back at him waiting for orders. But what orders could he give? His mighty armada was crippled. His perfect conquest had turned into a disaster, and the humans had done it all without firing a single shot. "What do you think they will do if I refuse?" Krath asked quietly. Roth pointed at the tactical display. "Look at our remaining ships. What do they all have in common?" Krath studied the display. The 35,000 functional ships were the older models. Ships built before humanity made contact with the Vorth. Ships using pure Vorth technology. "They left those ships functional on purpose," Roth said. "They want us to know that they could have disabled our entire fleet. But they chose not to. They are giving us a way out. Why? Why give us mercy?" "Because," said a new voice from the speakers, "defeating you completely serves no purpose." Everyone turned to look at the screen. Dr. Hana had joined Commander Taiho. She spoke in Vorth language, her voice calm and professional. "Supreme Leader Krath," she said. "My name is Dr. Hana. I have studied your culture for many years. I know that the Vorth value strength above all else. You see the galaxy as a place where the strong take from the weak. You started this war because you saw humanity as weak." Krath said nothing. She was right, but strength has many forms, Hana continued. "You measured strength in ships and soldiers. We measured it in time and planning. You wanted a battle. We wanted a solution. Now you see the result. What do you want from us?" Krath asked. "We want you to leave human space and never return. We want 50 years of peace to prove that both our species can coexist. And we want you to remember this day. Remember that humanity does not fight wars the way you expect. We do not win through force. We win through patience." Krath looked at the timer on his screen. 8 minutes remaining. "If I surrender," he said slowly, "what happens to my soldiers? The ones you took?" "All 35,000 soldiers who disappeared during the occupation are alive and unharmed," Taiho said. "They are being held in comfortable detention. They have been treated well. If you surrender now, they will be returned within 1 week." 35,000? Admiral Roth looked shocked. "We thought it was only 3,000. "No," Taiho said. "We took 35,000. We just made sure you only knew about some of them. We wanted you to feel uncertain, to not know how many were really missing. Fear of the unknown is more powerful than fear of the known." Krath felt something break inside him. Everything about this war had been an illusion. The empty colonies, the disappearing soldiers, the sabotaged equipment. All of it carefully planned to make the Vorth defeat themselves through fear and confusion. 5 minutes, Taiho said. Krath made his decision. "I surrender. On behalf of the Vorth Empire, I accept your terms." On the human ships, crews waited for orders. They had been ready for battle, but battle would not come. Captain Jinho watched his sensors as the Vorth fleet powered down its weapons. "It is done," he said to Commander Taiho over the communication channel. "They are standing down." "Good," Taiho replied. "Begin restoration of their systems. Slowly. I want them to understand that we control when their ships work, not them." Specialist Dongho worked at his console, carefully reactivating Vorth systems. Ship by ship, power came back online. Weapon systems rebooted, defensive shields raised. But every Vorth officer knew the truth. These systems only worked because humanity allowed them to work. Over the next hour, the entire Vorth fleet was restored to full functionality. They could have fought if they wanted, but no one gave that order. Supreme Leader Krath sat on his bridge and watched Earth floating peacefully below. "We will withdraw," he announced. "All ships prepare to leave the Sol system. Admiral Roth, transmit our formal surrender to the humans." The message was brief and professional. The Vorth Empire acknowledged defeat. They agreed to leave human space. They accepted the 50-year peace treaty. They would return to Vorth space and never threaten humanity again. As the massive fleet began its slow turn away from Earth, Admiral Roth approached Krath privately. "Supreme Leader, there is one thing I do not understand. Why did the humans evacuate their colonies? They clearly had the power to stop us at any time. Why let us occupy empty worlds for 9 months?" Krath thought about this. Then slowly he began to understand. "Because," he said quietly, "they needed time. Time for their sabotage to spread through our systems. Time for fear to break down our soldiers. Time for us to commit our entire fleet to this final attack. If they had fought us at the beginning, we might have retreated and regrouped. But by letting us occupy empty worlds, by making us feel victorious, they made sure we would bring everything we had to Earth. So the occupation was also a trap. Everything was a trap. From the moment they received our ultimatum, they were setting up our defeat, and we walked right into it, believing we were the ones in control." Back on the Silent Promise, Commander Taiho stood with his senior officers and watched the Vorth fleet depart. 300 million humans had been hiding for 9 months. Now they could go home. "How long did we plan this?" asked a young officer. 20 years, Engineer Suman said. "From the moment we first met the Vorth, we studied them. We sold them technology they wanted. We embedded code in everything. We waited, and if they had never attacked us, then none of this would have activated," Taiho said. "The Vorth would have continued using our technology, never knowing what it could do. But we always knew they would attack eventually. Species like the Vorth always attack. They cannot help themselves." Dr. Hanna pulled up statistics on her tablet. The psychological warfare was 98% effective. Vorth morale collapsed exactly as predicted. Their decision to bring the entire fleet to Earth was made on schedule. Everything happened according to the plan. "What about the 15,000 soldiers we captured?" Pilot Yuna asked. "What do we do with them?" "We return them as promised," Taiho said. "Unharmed, well-fed, healthy. We want them to go back to Vorth space and tell their people how humanity treated prisoners. We want them to talk about the empty cities that felt haunted. We want them to spread the story of how their mighty empire was defeated without a real battle. That story will spread across the galaxy," Captain Jinho said. "Other species will hear about it." "Good," Taiho replied. "Let them hear. Let them know that humanity does not win through strength alone. We win through patience, planning, and understanding our enemies better than they understand themselves." Over the next week, the Vorth fleet made the long journey back to their territory. The journey was quiet and somber. No one celebrated their return. There were no victory parades waiting for them. Instead, there was shame and confusion. The Vorth people had believed their military was invincible. Now they knew the truth. They had been outplayed at every level. Their soldiers talked about the haunted colonies and the invisible enemy. Their engineers discovered the embedded code in their systems and realized humanity had controlled them for years. The story of the war spread quickly. Within a month, every species in the nearby sectors knew what had happened. The mighty Vorth Empire had invaded human space and been defeated without humanity firing a shot. Other species reacted with fear and respect. The Kelani Union immediately sent ambassadors to Earth, requesting trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. The Azim Confederation, which had been building up military forces near human borders, suddenly pulled back and sent diplomatic messages of friendship. 17 different species contacted humanity within the first month, all wanting peaceful relations. They had all been watching to see how the Vorth War would end. Now they knew, humanity was not a species you fought directly. They were a species you treated carefully. On New Jeju Colony, the first families began returning home. The evacuation had been 9 months long, but everything was exactly as they left it. Power still ran. Streets were still clean. It was as if they had only been gone for a day. Specialist Dongho walked through the city with his team, removing the surveillance equipment they had installed. Thousands of tiny cameras and listening devices had watched every movement the Vorth made. The Fourth Armada was the largest military force ever assembled in their history. 50,000 warships, each one designed for destruction. Millions of soldiers ready for battle. Enough weapons to destroy a star system. Supreme Leader Krath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory, and watched his fleet gather. Ship after ship appeared from jump points, joining the formation. It was beautiful and terrible, a demonstration of absolute power. "This is our destiny," Krath announced to his bridge crew. "The humans hide because they fear us, but we will find their homeworld. We will face them in honorable combat, and we will show the galaxy what happens when someone challenges the Fourth Empire." His crew cheered. They believed in him. They believed in their strength. Admiral Roth was less certain. He stood beside Krath and watched the tactical displays. "Supreme Leader, I must remind you that we still do not know where the humans have been hiding." "If this is a trap, Krath laughed. "They are the ones who ran away. They are the ones who hide. How can they trap us? We have 50,000 ships. They abandoned their colonies without fighting. What will they do against this force?" Roth had no answer to that. The logic seemed sound. The humans had shown no military presence for 9 months. They had evacuated everything and everyone. What could they possibly do against the largest fleet in Vorth history? Still, something worried him, but he stayed silent. The fleet began its journey toward human space. It would take 2 weeks to reach Earth. 2 weeks of travel through empty space, with nothing to do but wait and watch for enemies that never appeared. On the 3rd day of travel, strange things began happening. A warship on the outer edge of the formation suddenly lost power. Everything went dark. Emergency systems kicked in and the crew found nothing wrong. All systems checked perfect, but the ship had been dead for 20 minutes. "Equipment malfunction," the ship's captain reported. "We are functional now." But 2 days later, it happened again. A different ship. Power loss. 20 minutes. Then everything working perfectly. Then it happened to 5 ships at once. Then 20. Then 100. Admiral Roth studied the reports with growing concern. "These are all ships using the Mark 7 power cores," he told Krath. "What is special about Mark 7 cores? We bought them from human manufacturers 15 years ago. The humans said they were more efficient than our designs. We installed them in 30% of our fleet." Krath stared at him. "Are you saying the humans sabotaged equipment they sold us 15 years ago?" "I am saying it is suspicious that only those ships are having problems. Test them. If they are sabotaged, replace them." Engineers examined the power cores. They ran every test they knew. The cores were perfect. Not a single flaw. Yet every ship with a Mark 7 core experienced random power failures during the journey. It made the fleet slow down. Made them travel more carefully. Made the 2-week journey stretch to 3 weeks. But that was only the beginning of their problems. On the 10th day of travel, the fleet's food supplies began to spoil. Not all of it. Just random shipments. Storage that had been fine yesterday would be full of rotten food today. The ship's cooling systems showed no failures. Everything worked perfectly. But the food spoiled anyway. "How is this possible?" Krath demanded. "We inspected all supplies before departure." "I do not know, Supreme Leader," said his logistics officer. "But we are losing 5% of our food every day. At this rate, we will need to return for resupply before reaching Earth." Krath refused. "No," we continue. "Ration what we have. We will reach Earth and take supplies there." The soldiers grumbled as their meals got smaller. Their morale was already low from months of strange occurrences in the occupied colonies. Now they were hungry too. Then the ammunition started failing. A weapons test was scheduled for day 15. Standard procedure. Fire a few shots to make sure everything worked. When the order came, half the fleet's weapons did not respond. The firing mechanisms were jammed. Not broken, just jammed. Engineers could fix them in an hour. But then different weapons would jam during the next test. Admiral Roth brought all these incidents to Krath. "Supreme Leader, I believe we are being attacked." "Attacked? By what? We have seen no enemy ships." "No, not attacked from outside. Attacked from inside. I think the humans have been sabotaging our equipment for years. Everything we bought from them. Everything they sold us. It all has hidden problems that activate when they want." Krath looked at the star map showing their position. They were still 1 week from Earth. Behind them, the occupied colonies seemed very far away. Ahead, human space waited in silence. Could they really plan something like this? Krath asked quietly. Could they sabotage equipment years before a war even started? The humans, Roth said carefully, are not like us. We value direct combat, honorable battle. They value patience, long-term planning. They think in decades, not days. Far away from the Vorth fleet, Engineer Suman sat in a control center and watched the data streams. Every piece of equipment her team had sold to the Vorth over the past 20 years was sending information back to her. And every piece had the hidden code she had embedded. The power cores are working perfectly, reported one of her engineers. The random shutdowns are happening exactly as programmed. Good, Suman said. What about the cooling systems? Also perfect. The food spoilage is right on schedule. We embedded bacteria spores in the storage containers years ago. They activate when exposed to specific temperature fluctuations. And the weapons? The firing mechanisms have microfractures built in. They will not break, but they will jam regularly. Cannot be fixed permanently, Suman smiled. 20 years ago, when humanity first made contact with the Vorth, her team had made a decision. They knew the Vorth were aggressive. They knew war might come someday, so they had prepared. Every piece of technology sold to the Vorth had hidden flaws. Not obvious ones. Nothing that would be found in normal testing. But flaws that could be activated remotely when needed. Power cores that could shut down. Storage systems that could spoil food. Weapons that could jam. Communication systems that could fail. For 20 years, the Vorth had bought human technology, thinking they were getting superior equipment. They never suspected they were installing their own defeat into every system they owned. How long can we keep this up? Asked one of her team. As long as needed, Suman said. We have control over 30% of their fleet systems. We can make their journey to Earth very uncomfortable. Commander Taiho stood on the bridge of the Silent Promise and watched the Vorth fleet struggling toward Earth. His ship was still hidden, still invisible to their sensors. Shadow fleet surrounded the Vorth armada, watching, waiting. They will reach Earth in 6 days, reported Captain Jinho. Should we engage them before then? No, Taiho said. Let them come. Let them see what waits for them. Dr. Hana stood beside him. The psychological damage is significant. The Vorth soldiers are tired, hungry, and their equipment keeps failing. They wanted a glorious march to victory. Instead, they are limping toward Earth, wondering what will go wrong next. How many ships do we have defending Earth? Taiho asked. 100, Jinho said. As planned. Taiho nodded. 100 ships against 50,000. The Vorth would see those odds and feel confident. They would think victory was certain. They would be wrong. On day 21, the Vorth fleet finally reached the Sol system. Admiral Roth stood on the bridge and looked at the sensor displays. There was Earth, the human homeworld, and there, arranged in defensive formation, were exactly 100 human ships. Is that all? Asked Krath, staring at the display. 100 ships? Yes, Supreme Leader. Our sensors detect no other human vessels in the system. Krath started laughing. 100 ships against 50,000. They are not even trying to defend themselves. But Admiral Roth felt that familiar worry in his stomach. Something was wrong. The humans had been planning this for months. They had evacuated 300 million people. They had sabotaged Vorth equipment for years. And now they defended their homeworld with only 100 ships. It made no sense unless a Supreme Leader, Roth said urgently. This could be a trap. We should scan more carefully before— Nonsense, Krath interrupted. They have nothing. Look at them. Humanity's great defense is 100 ships. He turned to his weapons officer. Lock weapons on the human fleet. Prepare to— A voice filled the bridge. It came from every speaker at once in perfect Vorth language. Commander Taiho's voice. Welcome. We have been expecting you. Every screen on every Vorth ship suddenly activated. They all showed the same thing. Commander Taiho sitting calmly in a chair looking directly at the camera. You came here for battle, Taiho said. You wanted us to fight you properly. You wanted honor and glory. But we do not fight wars the way you do. We do not measure victory by ships destroyed or soldiers killed. We measure it by how efficiently we achieve our goals. Krath tried to shut off the broadcast. His crew tried to block the signal. Nothing worked. Taiho's voice continued. For 20 years we have been preparing for this moment. Every piece of technology we sold you. Every system you installed. Every ship you built with our parts. They all belong to us now. Admiral Roth understood then. He understood everything. Supreme Leader, he said quietly. We need to retreat. Right now, but it was too late. Just this morning, an entire patrol of 12 soldiers had vanished. They had been checking a residential block. 6 months had passed since the Vorth invasion began. In the Vorth capital world, millions celebrated their empire's greatest conquest. Parades filled the streets. Supreme Leader Krath gave speeches about how humanity had surrendered without a fight, proving Vorth superiority. Monuments were being built to commemorate the bloodless victory. But on the occupied worlds themselves, something very different was happening. General Vexthor sat in his office and stared at the casualty report. Not casualties from battle. The Vorth had not fired a single shot in anger since the occupation began. These were losses from other causes. 15% of his occupation force was gone. 30,000 soldiers missing, vanished, disappeared without a trace. His hand shook as he put down the report. In 6 months of occupation, he had lost more troops than the Vorth military had lost in their last 3 wars combined. And he could not explain where they went. There was a knock on his door. "Enter," Vexthor said. His intelligence officer came in. She looked tired, her uniform rumpled. "General, we have another incident. Colony World Incheon. A supply convoy. What happened? 40 ships entered the system 2 days ago. They were on schedule, carrying food and ammunition for the garrison. They arrived at the station this morning." Vexthor waited. "And? All 40 ships docked perfectly. Automated systems worked fine. But when the dock workers boarded to unload, they found every ship empty. Not just empty of crew, empty of everything. No cargo, no supplies, no personal items, nothing. That is impossible. 40 ships do not just empty themselves. That is not the worst part," the intelligence officer said quietly. "On the bridge of the lead ship, someone left a message. She placed a photograph on his desk." Vexthor looked at it and felt his blood run cold. Written in Vorth blood across the control console were words in their language. "You wanted war. This is humanity's war. Whose blood?" Vexthor asked. "We do not know. It matches no Vorth genetic markers in our database. We think it might be artificial blood created to look real." Vexthor stood up and walked to his window. Below, Vorth soldiers patrolled the empty streets of the human city. They moved in groups now, never alone, always watching the buildings around them with fearful eyes. "I need to speak with the Supreme Leader," Vexthor said. "He will not listen," the intelligence officer replied. "He thinks you are exaggerating. Then I will make him listen." That evening, Vexthor opened a direct communication channel to the Vorth homeworld. Supreme Leader Krath's face appeared on the screen, looking annoyed at the interruption. "This had better be important. General? We need to withdraw from human space," Vexthor said bluntly. Krath's expression hardened. "Explain." "We have lost 30,000 soldiers in 6 months. They are not dead. They have vanished. Something is taking them and we cannot stop it. My troops are terrified. Morale is collapsing. This occupation is destroying our military." "You occupy empty worlds," Krath said coldly. "How can empty worlds destroy the mighty Vorth military?" "They are not empty. The humans are here. We cannot see them, but they are here. They are watching us, taking us, breaking us down piece by piece." Krath leaned forward. "Have you seen a single human since the occupation began?" "No, but have you detected human ships? Human bases? Human anything?" "No, but the evidence is that you are weak," Krath shouted. "The humans ran away. They abandoned their colonies. They surrendered. And now you tell me they are somehow defeating us? You shame the Vorth Empire with your cowardice." "Supreme Leader, please listen. No, you will maintain the occupation. You will restore order among your troops, and you will stop making excuses for your failures. Is that clear?" Vexthor stared at the screen. "Yes, Supreme Leader." "Good. Do not contact me again unless you have actual victory to report." The screen went dark. Vexthor sat in the darkness of his office. Outside, he could hear soldiers calling to each other as they patrolled. They stayed close together now, talking constantly, afraid of the silence. He did not blame them. He was afraid too. On a human stealth ship moving silently through the occupied zone, pilot Yuna prepared for another extraction mission. She had been doing this for 6 months now, and she was very good at it. "Target confirmed," said her co-pilot. 3 Vorth soldiers in residential sector 20, separated from main patrol. Yuna studied the tactical display. The 3 soldiers were searching an apartment building, checking for threats that did not exist. They had no idea that a human ship was hovering 200 meters above them. Completely invisible to their sensors, position the extraction team, Yuna ordered. Below her ship, 4 figures dropped silently from the cargo bay. They wore advanced stealth suits that bent light around them, making them nearly invisible. They landed on the roof of the apartment building without a sound. The team moved through the building like shadows. They used non-lethal sleep gas on the first soldier, catching him before he fell. The second soldier was taken when he turned a corner, a hand over his mouth before he could scream. The third never knew what happened. One moment he was talking on his radio. The next he was unconscious. The extraction team carried all 3 soldiers to the roof. Yuna's ship descended, a hatch opened and the soldiers were lifted inside. Total time 4 minutes. 0 detection. Package secured, Yuna reported, returning to base. As her ship rose silently into the night sky, the remaining Vorth patrol searched for their missing comrades. They would search all night and find nothing. In the morning, they would report 3 more vanished soldiers. The number would go into Vexthor's casualty reports, and the fear would grow a little more. Intelligence Officer Hyunwoo sat in a secure facility far from the occupied zones, working on his latest project. His job was information warfare, and he was about to launch the biggest operation yet. "We have complete access to their communication networks," reported one of his technicians. "Every channel, military and civilian," Hyunwoo nodded. For months his team had been carefully infiltrating Vorth computer systems. The Vorth had good security, but they had made a critical mistake. They used human technology for some of their systems. Technology that humanity had sold them years ago. Technology with backdoors built in. "Prepare the message," Hyunwoo ordered. Dr. Hana had written the message herself. She had studied Vorth psychology for years and knew exactly what would frighten them most. It was not a threat. It was much worse than a threat. On every Vorth ship, station and colony, on military channels and civilian channels, on personal devices and public displays, the same message appeared simultaneously. It was a video, 10 seconds long. It showed Commander Taiho sitting in a chair wearing his uniform. He looked directly at the camera and spoke in perfect Vorth language. "We never surrendered. We never fled. We are all around you. We are waiting. Are you?" Then the screen went black. 10 seconds. That was all. But those 10 seconds were broadcast to every Vorth in occupied space and beyond. Millions of Vorth soldiers, civilians, and officers saw it at the same moment. Then silence returned. No other messages. No follow-up. Just those words and then nothing. The effect was immediate and devastating. On New Jeju, a Vorth soldier dropped his weapon and ran. His squad tried to stop him, but he was screaming. "They are here! They are watching! We need to leave!" His squad leader had to sedate him. On Hyundai Colony, an entire garrison refused to leave their base. The commander ordered them to patrol. They refused. "We will not go into the city," they said. "The humans are there." On 17 Vorth ships in orbit around occupied worlds, crew members requested immediate transfer back to Vorth space. When their requests were denied, some deserted. They stole shuttles and fled toward the border. Back in Vorth space, 3 colony governors who had been celebrating the conquest suddenly found themselves dealing with panic. Citizens who had relatives in the occupation force demanded they be brought home. "Our soldiers are dying," they cried. "Bring them back." Supreme Leader Krath watched the chaos unfold and felt his empire beginning to crack. He called an emergency meeting of his military council. "Explain this," he demanded. "Explain how one 10-second message caused panic across our empire." Admiral Roth, commander of the Vorth fleet, spoke carefully. "The message itself is not the problem, Supreme Leader. The problem is what it represents. For 6 months our soldiers have been disappearing. Equipment has been failing. Strange things have been happening. We told our people these were minor problems, but this message proved what they suspected. The humans never left." "They have been watching us the entire time, then find them!" Krath shouted. "Find where they are hiding and destroy them." "We have tried," Roth said quietly. "We have searched every system within reach. We have scanned every planet, every moon, every asteroid. We find nothing. It is as if 300 million humans simply vanished into space. That is impossible." "Yes, that is what frightens our soldiers. They are facing an impossible enemy." Krath sat back in his chair. For the first time since this began, he felt uncertain. The humans had not fought. They had not even shown themselves. But somehow they were winning. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Admiral Roth hesitated. "We could withdraw. Cut our losses. Leave human space. Never." Krath stood up. The Vorth MP. 3 months had passed since the Vorth occupation began. General Vex Thor stood in the operations center on New Jeju and looked at the reports coming in from all the occupied colonies. The numbers were clean and simple. 23 worlds under Vorth control, 200,000 soldiers deployed, 0 enemy resistance. By every military measure, this was a perfect conquest. So why did he feel so uneasy? "General," said one of his officers, "the patrol in Sector 7 has not reported in." Vex Thor looked at the map. Sector 7 was a residential district in the eastern part of the city. When did they miss their check-in? 30 minutes ago. It is probably nothing. Maybe a communication error. Vex Thor nodded, but something in his stomach tightened. This was the 5th missed patrol this week. Every time they found the soldiers later. They were fine, just confused. They claimed their communications had failed for a few minutes. But their equipment always tested perfectly afterward. "Send another unit to find them," Vex Thor ordered. Across the occupied colonies, similar small incidents were becoming more common. A patrol would go silent for an hour. Equipment would malfunction and then mysteriously work again. Soldiers reported feeling watched in the empty buildings. Nothing major. Nothing that could not be explained. But it was happening more and more often. On the colony world of Hyundai, a Vorth sergeant named Krell was leading a routine night patrol through an abandoned shopping center. His squad of 6 soldiers walked through the dark halls with their weapons ready. Their helmet lights cut through the darkness. "This place gives me bad feelings," said one of his soldiers. "Be quiet," Krell ordered. "It is just an empty building." But he felt it too. There was something wrong about these human cities. Everything was too perfect, too clean, too maintained. It was like walking through a museum of a civilization that had vanished overnight. They reached the center of the shopping complex where a fountain still ran, water splashing in the darkness. Krell's light swept across the stores. Empty display windows stared back at him like dead eyes. Then his radio crackled with static. "All units, report position," said the base commander's voice. But it sounded strange. Distant. Krell pressed his communicator. "Patrol 7, Sector 14, shopping complex. No contact, more static." Then silence. "Base, do you copy?" Krell tried again. "Nothing." "Check your equipment," Krell told his squad. "Someone have communications failure." The soldiers checked their radios. Everything showed green. "Working perfectly." "Try again, Sergeant," said one soldier, and Krell could hear nervousness in his voice. Krell pressed the communicator again. "Base, this is Patrol 7. Do you receive?" A sound came through the radio. Not static. Not the base commander. It was breathing. Slow and steady breathing. Then a voice whispered in perfect Vorth. "We see you." The radio went dead. Krell felt his blood run cold. Back to base, now double time. His squad needed no further encouragement. They ran through the dark shopping center, their lights bouncing off the empty stores. Behind them, Krell swore he heard footsteps. But when he looked back, there was nothing there. They reached the base 20 minutes later, out of breath and scared. The base commander looked annoyed. "Why did you break radio silence?" he demanded. "We lost communications," Krell explained. "We tried to report in but could not reach you." "We received no calls from you," the commander said. "Your radio never activated." "Are you saying your equipment failed?" They tested Krell's radio. It worked perfectly. There was no record of any transmission, no evidence of the whispered voice. The commander dismissed them as having overactive imaginations. But that night, Krell could not sleep. He kept hearing that whisper, "We see you." Far out in deep space, on a hidden human station, Captain Jinho reviewed the operation reports with satisfaction. Shadow Fleet had been deployed for 2 months now, and the results were better than expected. "How many Vorth have we taken?" he asked his second-in-command. 3,000 so far. All non-lethal extractions. They are being held in comfortable detention on Station 7. Jinho nodded. Station 7 was one of the hidden facilities where humanity was keeping captured Vorth soldiers. They were treated well, given food and medical care, but kept completely isolated. The Vorth Empire had no idea these soldiers were alive. They just knew they had vanished. "Continue the psychological operations," Jinho ordered. "But stay careful. We do not want them to see us." "Not yet. Specialist Dong Ho was managing the technical side of the operation. He sat in front of multiple screens showing data streams from every occupied colony. His team had planted thousands of tiny surveillance devices before the evacuation. They could see everything the Vorth did, hear everything they said, and occasionally they could interact. Target acquired in Residential Sector 12, said one of his technicians. Single Vorth soldier separated from his unit. Dong Ho pulled up the feed. A lone Vorth walked through an empty apartment building, doing a routine security check. He was young, probably on his first deployment. Activate ambient sound system, Dong Ho ordered. In the apartment building, the Vorth soldier paused. He heard something, a creaking floorboard above him. He looked up at the ceiling, his weapon ready. Nothing there. He continued walking. Then he heard it again. Footsteps, definitely footsteps coming from the floor above. Hello? The soldier called out. Identify yourself, Glintz. The soldier slowly climbed the stairs to the next floor. His weapon was raised, his heart pounding. The footsteps had stopped. The hallway was empty. Doors to apartments stood closed on both sides. Then one door slowly swung open. The soldier aimed at it. Come out now! Nothing emerged. The door just stood open, revealing a dark apartment. Against his better judgment, the soldier approached. He stepped through the doorway and swept the room with his light. Empty, furniture covered in dust. Windows dark. Behind him, the door slammed shut. The soldier spun around. His light hit the door. It was closed. He grabbed the handle and pulled. Locked. Let me out, he shouted, pounding on the door. The lights in the apartment suddenly came on. Every light at once, blindingly bright. Then they went out. When they came back on, the soldier saw something that made him scream. On the wall in front of him, written in what looked like blood but was actually paint, were words in Vorth language. You are not alone here. The soldier shot the door lock and ran. He burst into the hallway and kept running until he reached his patrol unit. When they went back to check, the apartment was empty. The door was unlocked. The walls were clean. There was no message, but the soldier knew what he had seen. Engineer Suman was coordinating the deep operations. Before the evacuation, her team had spent years embedding systems throughout human colonies. Now those systems were activating. Supply chains that the Vorth had taken over were beginning to fail in subtle ways. The food shipment to New Jeju will spoil 3 days early, reported one of her engineers. We triggered the temperature failure code. Good, Suman said. Make sure it looks like natural equipment malfunction. Nothing suspicious. Across the occupied worlds, Vorth supplies were having problems. Food spoiled unexpectedly. Fuel became contaminated. Ammunition failed quality tests. Each incident was small and explainable. Equipment just failed sometimes, but it was happening more and more. The Vorth logistics officers were pulling their hair out trying to figure out why everything was breaking down. Dr. Hana was studying the psychological data that Dong Ho's surveillance was collecting. She watched hours of footage of Vorth soldiers in the occupied cities. What she saw pleased her. They are scared, she told Commander Taiho. Not all of them yet, but it is spreading. The soldiers talk to each other about the strange things they see, about the sounds in empty buildings, about equipment that fails and then works perfectly, about the soldiers who vanish. How long until it reaches critical levels? Taiho asked. Another month, maybe less. The Vorth culture values direct confrontation. This type of warfare is alien to them. They do not know how to fight an enemy they cannot see. It goes against everything they believe about honor and combat. Taiho looked at the star map showing all the occupied colonies. Each one was slowly becoming a nightmare for the Vorth soldiers stationed there. And the disappearances? He asked Jinho. We will increase them, Jinho said. Right now we take isolated soldiers. Soon we will start taking small groups, then entire patrols. Each time we leave no evidence. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle. They just vanish. What about their command? Taiho asked. What is Vexthor thinking? Dongo pulled up intercepted communications. He is requesting reinforcements. He says his soldiers are suffering from stress and paranoia. He does not understand why. The Supreme Leader Krath has denied his request. Krath thinks Vexthor is weak. Perfect, Taiho said quietly. The Vorth military structure is rigid. They do not adapt well. They will follow their doctrine even when it is destroying them. Back on New Jeju, General Vexthor stood on the balcony of the governor's mansion and looked out over the city. Lights glowed in every building. The streets were clean and maintained. Everything looked peaceful, but he could feel the fear growing among his troops. Soldiers who had been confident warriors 3 months ago now jumped at shadows. They refused to patrol alone. They whispered stories about ghosts and demons in the empty cities. Commander Taiho stood on the bridge of the Silent Promise and stared at the message on the screen. His face showed nothing, but inside, his mind was working fast. The message had come from the Vorth Empire, and it was not friendly. "They want us to surrender," said Captain Jinho from behind him. 30 days or they attack." Taiho read the words again. The Vorth were a powerful race. They controlled 200 worlds across space. Their military was massive, their weapons advanced, and their reputation was built on conquest. They had never lost a war. Now they wanted humanity to bow down without a fight. "What do you think they expect us to do?" Taiho asked. Dr. Hana stepped forward. She was the chief science officer and had spent years studying alien cultures. Her specialty was understanding how other species thought, how they made decisions, and what drove them to war. "They expect us to panic," Hana said. Her voice was calm and steady. "They have studied our history. They know about our wars, our weapons, and our aggression. They think we will mobilize our fleets, call emergency meetings, and try to negotiate or prepare for battle." Taiho nodded slowly. The Vorth had done their homework. Human history was full of violence and conflict. Every alien species that looked at humanity saw the same thing: a race that fought constantly, that built bigger weapons, that never backed down from a challenge. "They want a battle," Taiho said quietly. "They want us to line up our ships against theirs. They want a war they can understand." "Yes," Hana agreed. "The Vorth culture values combat. They believe honor comes from facing your enemy directly. Their entire military strategy is based on overwhelming force and direct confrontation. They have positioned their fleets at jump points all around human space. They are ready for our counterattack." Jinho looked between them. "So what do we do?" Taiho turned away from the screen and looked out at the stars. The Silent Promise was one of 50 command ships in the United Earth Coalition fleet. Beyond the viewport, space stretched endlessly. Somewhere out there, the Vorth were waiting. Their generals were probably sitting in war rooms right now, planning their invasion routes, calculating how many ships they would lose, preparing their soldiers for glorious battle. "We give them nothing," Taiho said. Jinho frowned. "Nothing?" No response. No fleet movements. No diplomatic channels. Complete silence. Hana smiled slightly. She understood immediately. "Ghost Protocol," Taiho nodded. "Send the order. Every human colony, every station, every ship. Activate Ghost Protocol. We evacuate everyone. We leave nothing behind." Over the next 20 days, something unprecedented happened across human space. 300 million people began to disappear. On 47 colony worlds, families packed their belongings. Ships arrived in the night and left before dawn. Orbital stations powered down. Cities went dark. The evacuation was not rushed or panicked. It was organized, methodical, and absolutely silent. No one sent messages. No one made announcements. The human colonies simply emptied like water draining from a sink. On New Jeju, a colony world of 12 million people, Engineer Suman oversaw the final stages. She stood in the central square of the capital city as the last transport lifted off. The streets were empty. Lights still glowed in the windows. Cars sat parked along the curbs. Everything looked normal, except there were no people. "Power grid is set to automatic," reported one of her team. "It will run for 6 months without human input." "Good," Suman said. "Make sure all the food storage is maintained. Keep the climate control active. I want everything to look like people just stepped away for a moment." "Why?" asked a younger engineer. "Why not just shut everything down?" Suman looked at him. "Because when the Vorth arrive, we want them to feel uncomfortable. We want them to walk through a living city with no one in it. We want them to see our lives continuing without us. It will bother them more than any destroyed city ever could." The young engineer nodded slowly, beginning to understand. Across human space, the same scene repeated. Colonies emptied but stayed alive. Cities ran on automatic systems. Farms kept growing crops with no one to harvest them. It was eerie and deliberate. The Vorth watched all of this through their spy satellites and long-range sensors. In their command center, General Vexthor studied the reports with growing confusion. "They are evacuating," he told Supreme Leader Krath over the communication channel. "Every colony, every station." "Evacuating where?" Krath demanded. "Our sensors should track their ships." "That is the problem, Supreme Leader. We see ships leaving the colonies, but then they disappear. We lose them in deep space. We do not know where 300 million humans went." There was silence on the channel. Then Krath spoke again, his voice hard. "It does not matter, they run like cowards. When our deadline passes, we will take their empty colonies. We will occupy their worlds. They surrender without fighting, which proves they were never worthy opponents." But Vexthor felt uneasy. Something about this seemed wrong. Humans did not run from fights. Their entire history screamed aggression and stubbornness. Yet now they vanished like ghosts. On day 30, the deadline passed. The Vorth had sent their ultimatum expecting a response, either surrender or war. They received neither. Human space was silent. No messages came back. No diplomats appeared. No fleets mobilized. The silence was absolute and complete. Krath ordered the invasion to begin. Vorth battle fleets, massive and powerful, jumped into human systems. Their ships were designed for war, covered in weapons, crewed by warriors bred for combat. They arrived ready for the greatest battle in Vorth history. Instead, they found empty space. The first fleet entered the new Jeju system. Sensors swept the area, looking for human warships. There were none. They approached the planet cautiously, expecting a trap, expecting hidden weapons platforms or defensive satellites. There was nothing. They landed troops in the capital city. 10,000 Vorth soldiers marched through the streets, in formation, their weapons ready, their armor gleaming. They moved through a city of 12 million people and found it completely empty. General Vexthor walked through the central square himself. Everything was clean and maintained. The lights worked. He could smell food cooking somewhere, automated kitchens still running their programs. A fountain splashed in the center of the square. Music played softly from speakers in the shopping district, but there were no people. "Secure all buildings," Vexthor ordered. "Search everywhere. Find me a human. Find me one human." His soldiers spread through the city. They kicked in doors, searched homes, scanned office buildings. They found empty chairs in front of computers that were still running. They found beds that were made. They found refrigerators full of food and closets full of clothes, but no people. By the end of the first day, Vexthor had to report to Supreme Leader Krath. "The colony is empty, Supreme Leader. All 12 million people are gone." "Then we control the planet," Krath said. "Move to the next target." Over the next week, the pattern repeated across 23 human colonies. The Vorth fleets arrived, met no resistance, and occupied empty worlds. Their soldiers marched through ghost cities. Their flags were raised over silent capitals. Their victory announcements were broadcast to populations that did not exist. On the 8th day, Vexthor sat in the governor's mansion on New Jeju. It was a beautiful building with large windows overlooking the city. Everything about it was perfect and maintained and completely abandoned. He looked at his aide. "Where are they?" The aide had no answer. Somewhere in deep space, aboard a hidden station far from any mapped route, Commander Taiho watched the reports. 300 million humans surrounded him, living in temporary shelters on dozens of secret stations and ships. The evacuation had worked perfectly. "The Vorth now occupy 23 of our colonies," Jinho reported. 200,000 of their troops are spread across our former worlds. They have declared victory. Taiho nodded slowly. "Good. Now we wait." "For what?" asked a younger officer. Dr. Hana answered instead. "For them to realize that victory is not the same as winning. For them to understand that they are not occupying our colonies. They are trapped in them." Taiho looked at the star map showing all the Vorth positions. "They came expecting battle. We gave them silence. Now we give them time to understand what that silence really means. In the empty cities of New Jeju, Vorth soldiers began their occupation. They did not know that humanity's real war was just beginning.